Hey there. So it's been a while since I've recorded a video. Lots going on over the last 6 months or so. I've had a knee replacement, and that's mainly due to too much sport, not enough rest when I was a bit younger, and not managing it properly. But hey ho, it's all done now. And also in the last couple of weeks we've got a new puppy in the house, which is called Sponks, which is short for Sponken, which is Welsh for squash. Not my choice of name, although I do endorse it. My kids had a vote and they thought Sponks was a cool name for a dog, and he's a spaniel poodle cross. He's a spoodle or a cockapoo, however you want to put it, but he's pretty nuts, he's pretty friendly, and he's already spent a little bit of time lying on the mat on the inside of my office. So back to what racket we're doing now. So we've got the brand new Dunlop CX132. So this is the one with 16 main strings in, which Diego Alias will be using and Jonah Bryant is currently using as well. It's essentially replacing the old Ultimate rackets or the Sonic Core variants. There's been lots of variants of this racket over the last 15-20 years or so, and this is the one with a slightly larger head but with a much tighter, dense string pattern. As always, or seems to be the case with most of the top of the range Dunlops in recent years, you could probably see it's got these grooves which are being cut out where the string slots in them. So it's absolutely essential, and it's got short side on here, long side here. We've got an L or an S. It's essential that you make sure that you do the preparation work before you start stringing the racket to make sure that you actually get those strings lined up within the slots. Otherwise you'll have strings that go over the bumps, which then expose on the outside of the frame, rub away on the walls or the floors, and then the strings snap on the outside. I've said it for ages, I'm not a massive fan of having these slots in the rackets. I think they're not necessarily needed. It's probably additional weight as well on the bumper strips, and it does mean that on certain stringing patterns it makes it more difficult for the average stringer to work out exactly what to do. Now this racket is a little bit different to a lot of the regular shaped rackets. So when I say regular, I mean the rackets that have got a throat in them, as opposed to the teardrop, more common rackets like the Carboflexes which are used. This is a bit different because it's got 16 main strings in, but it still has 6 grommet holes at the throat. This means that you start from the throat as you normally would do, but naturally the main strings would finish on each side at the throat. Now this would mean that typically on a one piece you would start stringing the crosses from the throat to the head. We don't want to do that, okay? It's how it comes as standard from the factories, but for anybody that's really in the know with stringing, they'll tell you that you always string the crosses from the head down to the throat. It creates a much better sweet spot, much kinder to the frame as well, because when you're putting all of the end tension at the head, at the loop, that's where the weakest part of the racket is. So what you're actually doing is compromising the frame, whereas the throat, where it's got this, it's got a bit more material, it's a little bit smaller as well, a bit shorter in width, and it's got the triangle base on it. That's where you get more protection from. So it's much better to put the end bit of tension going at the throat than it is at the head. So without further ado, let's get the racket mounted up, and I will show you an around the world string pattern which we're going to do on this one, because you need to do an around the world because, as I said before, the main strings finish at the throat naturally. So clamp the racket up again, making sure that we have the racket equidistant from the different ends of the post. This is where the Technofiber X cord stringer machine comes in really handy, because it's actually got some little measuring units here, so you can check on the distance between the pillars here and the racket hitting that. So it's a really good thought of Technofiber when they designed this machine in the first place. For the string, so I'm going to string with Technofiber 305 1.2, tried and tested. It's probably the most popular string on tour. Because this has got more main strings in it than the average racket, it's got 16, so 8 on each side. What we need to do is just measure out a little bit more strings. So a question I get asked a lot is how much string do you measure out? So I'm about 6'1"-ish, 6'1", 6'1.5"-ish. I've got very long arms though. I'll be measuring out for this one. Normally, for most rackets, I do about 5 full arm spans worth. For this one, I'm doing about 5 1/3 arm spans. So for somebody that's a bit shorter than me with slightly shorter arms, maybe 5.5 arm spans, possibly even up to 6 if you want to be absolutely dead sure. But 5 1/3 long arm spans will be absolutely sufficient. That will do the mains, it will do the crosses. Again, for those who've watched other videos of mine, I generally tend to have the short side on this side, which bucks the trend with a few stringers, and the long side on this side. Because of the way that the notches are on this racket, we need to start the short side on the regular side, so where it actually says S, so it's on this side of the racket. So it's different to how I normally do it, but we've got to make sure that we get the strings in the notches. So after you've done your first couple of strings on these types of rackets, you'll get a little bit more used to it, but it's absolutely essential that you get this in the right order. So let's measure out what we do. So because this has got 8 strings either side, I'm going to do, for the short side, I'm going to measure off 9 head lengths of string for the short side, and then the rest will be done for the long side and the majority of the cross strings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that will cover me for the short side and the last remaining crosses at the throat area when we come down to this. Another thing which is worth mentioning on this racket is get the tension right on this, because it's a much denser string pattern, even though it's quite a large head, because it's a much denser string pattern due to the extra strings on the mains and crosses. Just turn the tension down a little bit. So typically for this shape of head, I'd normally go somewhere between 24 to 26 pounds tension. I'm going to go on 24 pounds tension on this, so it still gives fairly decent control, but at the same time it also still allows for some decent power. So just pulling tension on the string there, and then I'll pull through. Another little tip for the long side, so for the bit which is a bit longer, when you're not using it, just pop it through one of the side grommets there. It means it's a lot quicker and easier for you to grab it when you're not using it. Right, I'm also going to take my watch off whilst I'm stringing. The reason why is because I don't like it getting in the way, and I don't really want to scratch my watch face up. So especially when you're stringing at speed and not taking as much care and attention, keep your hands and wrists and everything else as free as you can. So same with all the other rackets that I string. I'm going to do 2 on each side, or go 2 ahead on each side, and then move over. Again, you shouldn't really be doing more than 3 ahead on each side, but for the purposes of this racket and most of the other ones I go 2 ahead, and then you just catch up on it. You might see me every now and again removing little bits of dust, because this racket's come straight from the factory. It's got some dust build up in some of the grommets, so I'm just having to take some of the bits of fluff and dust out of the grommets as it's pulling through. Definitely not from my carpet, because I've just hoovered my carpet. It's given it its two monthly hoover. Should be more really. So this racket has just been released. For some eagle-eyed viewers, you may have noticed that Jonah Bryant has already been using this in the British Champs and also in the London Classic. So he's been using it in his last 2 tournaments. I caught up with Jonah in the summer at an exhibition he was playing with Mo El Shabaghi, and he was using this racket then, and he seemed to have really positive things to say about it. As is normally the case with Dunlop, I'm not 100% sure quite how much this would have changed from the old Sonic Core Ultimate, but you know, it's normally little tweaks, the same as at every other manufacturer. It's a new paint job, sometimes some slightly different material. I think the aim of this one was to get the balance a little bit different, but as with every racket, there's always So as you can see, I've just gone 2 ahead on this. So I've tensioned 4 strings on there, 2 strings on there. Now I'll even it up on this side. As is the case with most of these rackets, there is some variance with the specs. So this is supposed to be a frame weight of 132. It could be anywhere 5 grams higher, 5 grams lower. So you could be, and that's the same with every manufacturer. There is, unless you're going to pay £300–500 for a racket, there's no way the manufacturers can afford to have the quality control so tight that every single frame is bang on 132 or 125 or whatever it may be. It just isn't possible. So the thing is, you could in theory get one of these rackets at 127 frame weight. You could get another racket that might be 147. You know, it could go a little bit either way. It could go 5 grams either way. So just something to bear in mind, and maybe not get so annoyed with the manufacturers if you see a big difference, but certainly should be only 5 grams difference either way. Also worth noting as well is, don't expect to buy this frame where it says 132 and have the total weight being 132, because the 132 is for the frame weight. Doesn't include bumper, doesn't include strings, doesn't include grip either. I'd normally say add an additional 30 to 35 grams on top of the frame weight to get your true actual weight of the frame. So this frame, excuse me, this frame I would imagine will come out to somewhere approaching, so I'm just going to clamp this one off here. I would imagine this frame will come out, this racket total will come out to about 160 to 165. So let's get this actually. Do you know what? So when I talk about switching sides from short side to long side, is exactly what I've just done on this on this racket now. Is I've actually put the clamp first time round on the other side of the racket because I'm not used to it, so it's fine. So as long as you can spot it straight away, then you're all good with it. So this is just more of a mental thing for me. So when I'm talking and stringing and thinking at the same time, I'm good at talking, or I talk too much. Pretty good at stringing. Doing everything at the same time, not necessarily my forte. So you'll have to forgive me a little bit on that one. Maybe I should have asked when they did my knee replacement. Maybe I should have asked the doctors if they could do anything about my multitasking skills. So little things is with this racket as well for me to remember. Maybe not people that are used to doing the short side on the other side anyway. Is I've got to remember to go down and up the opposite sides to what I normally would do when I'm doing an around the world pattern such as this. So again, this is just a modified UK RSA pattern on this one. It's a good string pattern. It works for this racket. But again, for most rackets with this shape of frame, you normally wouldn't need to do that particular string pattern. You could normally just do a regular restring because normally the mains would finish at the head. And I think there's probably plenty of videos which I've done which have got the rackets which are a bit more regular. So you may wonder why I've just gone why I've not strung one ahead on here like I normally do. It's purely because the mount here, the post, just gets in the way a little bit of me doing it that way. So it's just a bit easier for me to do it this way so that I'm not crimping on the string. Because obviously we want to look after our strings as we're going through it, so I don't really want the strings bouncing off the posts. And what I will also be doing is just using my machine brake in a minute just to stop that string from pulling back against the post. So I'll use the brake now. You might hear that click, So the frame doesn't move, so there's a gap in between, because it just means that you're getting the right tension. So I'll take the brake off. This is a really good machine for the brake actually. The brake is rock solid on this machine. It's electronic as well, which is useful. Now you can, on this machine, put a function on it whereby the brake automatically comes on, but I normally like to have a bit of freedom. I think you only need the brake on once or twice on these types of frames when you're stringing, and that's just when you're getting near these post areas. Clearly, if you're stringing a Prince powering with the O ports or with the speed ports on the side, then you always need a brake for 99% of all the cross strings that you're going to be doing. But now, for example, I won't need it because there's a big gap there, so I'm not going to lose any tension. But you also need to look at the angle of the string when you're pulling the crosses through. So I'm not rattling through this one quite as quickly as I normally would do, just on the basis I keep having to turn my head around to make sure that my puppy isn't wandering and standing behind me, because he does have a habit of creeping up on me fairly quickly and unannounced. I'll see if there's a way in which I can get a photo put on here afterwards, because I think it would be one for any dog lovers if you want to watch it. But there may be some people that hate dogs. so some people might like it, some people might hate it. Oops. Just very unhandily wrapping the string around the handle on the clamp. So also this week has just been released as well is the brand new Technofiber /120 control and the rest of the new Slash series. So Technofiber, with their main product lines, they launch a new product line every 2 years. So the Carboflex is 1 year into its V2 life cycle, so there'll be a new Carboflex coming out next September. But the Slash has just completed its first 2 years in production, so they've just brought out the new V2 of the Slash. You might be able to see it actually. I've got one of them just down by my bag down there, so not sure if any eagle-eyed viewers spotted that. And that the new Slash control, 120 control, is an absolutely brilliant racket. A lot more usable, I think, than the previous Slash. The previous Slash 120 was fantastic if your control and your discipline was very, very good, and your technique. However, for those that didn't have perfect technique or discipline, quite a lot of people found it a little bit too stiff, a little bit too difficult to control. The new Slash 120 control is a lot more flexible. So yeah, that's I've been playing around with those for a few months now. This racket though, so back to the racket at hand, but by all accounts this is getting some pretty good reviews actually from those that I know who are either in the pro game that are using it or amateurs. It says it's a headlight racket. I'll check on that after. I'll see just how headlight that is, this racket is. I'm not convinced it's mega headlight. It might be a little bit more headlight than the previous one, but I think because of the sheer amount of string involved, 'cause it's got a lot more string in it than most rackets with this shape head, you may find that the frame itself is a bit more headlight than the previous version, but the actual racket itself, when it's got the strings in it, it's probably got an extra gram or two of string in it than most others. So that extra string might just tilt the scales a little bit more down to being a little bit more medium or head heavy. I mean, I would say any racket that's between sort of 350 to 360, I would say that's normally a fairly good balance for a racket, fairly medium-ish balance. Anything over 360, you start to get into the kind of head heavy region, really. But again, it does depend. And it's not that head heavy rackets are bad, not at all. If a racket's a bit more head heavy, it actually can help give you a bit more control, and conversely give you a bit more power as well, just because you've got more weight behind it, so the swing speed increases and you can actually get a little bit more weight. So I'm not going to clamp this one off quite as tight this time, because I'm going to come up through the last main string. So using the using the long side, we've used the majority of it now. Now we just do the little fiddly bit of going back up the main side. So again, normally I would be going up on that side on around the world, but I've had to reverse the way I do it. But yeah, I think this racket with this string combo, I think it'll be good, because it's a racket that should, in theory, be decent for control because of the bent string pattern. This string is a really good string for getting good bite on the ball. So I've got some pretty positive thoughts that this racket's going to be a bit of a success for Dunlop as well. Interesting to know what people think about the colour combo. I don't know. I used to quite like the old black and yellow combo. I thought that was pretty cool. I think certainly the combo from a few years ago was really good. This one, I'm not sure yet. Jury's out a little bit. It's quite reserved colour choice. I think it's got obviously the flashes of orange that are in there as well, which brighten it up a little bit. But I quite like rackets that are nice and bright, or very dark, one or the other. But interesting. So interesting clash of orange and maroon, but they've probably got fancier names than that. But again, we've all got different tastes completely, and there'll be some people that think this colour choice is absolutely unbelievably good. So we've now got all of the mains installed. So I'm just talking about colours as I should be doing the important stuff. So we've got all the mains installed, and I'm now going to come across and do the final cross. So we always leave, probably should have mentioned that at the start, when you start the crosses on and around the world pattern, generally speaking, if it's this pattern, you start on the second cross string down from the head, so that you can come across on here. And the reason why you do that is largely because you want that both the mains to be tensioned very similar. I'm not going to add additional tension onto this last cross here. Normally I'd add a little bit more, especially if you're doing tennis rackets as well. You add an extra 10-20% onto the final pull. I quite like having it a little bit softer, so although I've pulled it at the same tension as all the other cross strings, in theory, once you've tied it off, it'll probably lose a little bit of that tension. The reason why that's quite good is because it's a lot more cramped up there. You actually want a little bit softer here, because you're playing the ball off the wall, so it still allows you to get a bit of power, but also it's not so tight that it's going to break the strings at the top all the time. So you actually want a little bit of comfort on the top. So that's what I've found certainly works the best. You might get some people that say they want to have that additional 10-20% on there. Well, that's cool. It's how I like to do it. It's how I think people are going to get the best results bringing that ball off the wall. So we're nearly at the end now, not too far. So got the last cross that we're just about to install. And again, I've not been trying to go super quick on this one. I think the total of the string is probably going to be about 18, 19, 20 minutes or so. It's more so I can talk through what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So we've got the last cross that's just been installed now. We can get fairly close to the frame on that without hitting that string. Possibly could get a little bit closer, but what I don't want to do is damage this main string here. So if I brought the clamps any further, I'd be at risk of just scoring that string a little bit. And again, I like to keep the end crosses a little bit softer. Just managed to hit my phone then when I was putting the string up. Apologies for that. So again, we're doing a Parnell knot, which is, I think, probably the world's favourite knot, certainly in tennis anyway. It's nice and secure, nice and neat. Holding onto the string as we release that clamp, release the other one as well. So it just keeps it nice and straight, nice neat knot there, and then we can come up and clamp the other one. One thing I normally do before I tie the last knot off is just quickly check that the racket's not going to be rattling the frame. Now, interestingly, this gives a good indicator as to the stiffness of the frame. When I've tried to alter this to make sure there's no rattle, I've not had to actually alter. So I touch the sides, touch the knobs there to try to bring the arms in a little bit more. Didn't make any difference. So that would indicate to me that this is a very stiff frame. So that will mean that you might get a frame that gives you some pretty good feedback, but it also might indicate that it's particularly stiff, certainly going out sideways. So just something to bear in mind. I think the last frame I had that with was I think it was the old Black Knight Corona. Very stiff frame, but most rackets, again, there'll be a little bit of wobble as the frame pulls in a bit as the strings are tensioning. That's the same with squash, tennis, badminton, racquetball, I would say paddle, but obviously there's no strings in paddle, and for stringers, paddle's a useless sport for stringers, but for everyone else it's good fun, I guess. So just pulling that Parnell knot. Again, I'm not trying to yank the string too much. I'm being fairly firm with it, but I'm not trying to yank the string to the point where it damages the knot on the end, because quite often, especially with a few amateur stringers, you'll get breaks that tend to happen around the tie-off areas, the knot areas. That's because they've not really taken their time with what they're doing. They just pull, yank, damage the string. We try to keep the strings fairly straight as we go along, as you may have seen, so we haven't got a massive smiley face, but just need to straighten them up a little bit now to finish with. What I will do, because this is quite a tight string pattern, once I get this racket off the machine, I'm going to just finish it off with the straightening, but by finger a little bit, just because it is a very dense pattern. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, just showing you how I would string this racket. But the most important thing is, no matter what you do, this racket really should be strung with the cross strings going from head to throat, because naturally it would go from throat to head based on how it comes out the factory. But stringers in the factories, this is their job, is to get the strings in the rackets as quickly as possible, and then have a industrial strength paint logoed across the strings. I think most manufacturers also recognise that the majority of people that spend £100 to £150 on a racket, chances are they'll probably want to put their own strings in there as well. So there we go, all strung, all good.